All right, here we go. Today we have lawyer Joe Tacopina, a.k.a. ASAP Joe, who has represented Donald Trump, Michael Jackson, Meek Mill, Alex Rodriguez, and most recently helping ASAP Rocky beat his gun case. Welcome to Vlad TV.
Thanks, Vlad. It's a pleasure to be here.
Listen, congratulations on your success, man. Quite a track record over the years.
Thank you, brother. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a little bit of luck, and some grit, some character, some Brooklyn grit. So I appreciate it.
Well, I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which, listen, I used to live in Flatbush. Brownsville always has been considered the roughest part of Brooklyn.
It still is the roughest part of Brooklyn.
Brownsville's still
Brownsville.
Right. It hasn't really changed much over the years.
Right. You know, you look at Bed-Stuy. Back then, Bed-Stuy was almost neck and neck with Brownsville. Brownsville was always a little bit more risque, a little dangerous. But now Bed-Stuy is one of the most fashionable places to live in New York City. Brownsville's still Brownsville. We only have a few bodegas in Brownsville, one great old Italian pizzeria that's still there, and that's all you got. There's nothing. I was there with one of the congresswomen in Brownsville trying to, still give back to the community a little bit, and drove around, and there's just nothing that looks any different than when I was a kid.
Well, you grew up with Italian immigrant parents. And at the time, was Brownsville, was it mixed at all? Was it mostly black or mostly Italian, the area you lived in? Because every time I've gone through Brownsville, it's been almost all black.
It's all black. So here's what happened. It's a great story, actually. Brownsville, historically, and it's a great history there, was a place in the 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s that really were the home of Jewish and Italian immigrants. They were all migrated there. It was Jewish and Italian immigrants. As a matter of fact, you had that very famous mob killing arm called Murder Incorporated. It was based out of Brownsville, a little candy store in Livonia and Rockaway. Rose's Candy Store, which is still there. It's now a bodega, of course. But that's where, Albert Anastasia and all those guys, they basically had a hit squad of Jewish and Italian mobsters that would be launched to get a rival. And so it was a paid for sort of a by hire hit squad. And that's Brownsville. I mean, it was a lot of hardworking Jewish and Italian immigrants. And then like in the early 60s, the Italian and Jewish immigrants sort of moved out. And it became primarily an entirely black community. And it is an entirely black community. My parents apparently didn't get that memo. So they wound up staying in the same house on Mother Gaston, and until I was about 11, 12 years old, but they stayed there. And so I was literally the only white kid in the neighborhood at my school, but I didn't know any better. I just thought I was a light-skinned black guy, honestly. And in the summer, I wasn't even the lightest black guy. So it was, I just thought that's how it was. And so I grew up in that community, and they became sort of, part of my vibe, part of my upbringing. Again, for me, I'm colorblind, so it sort of helped me become, entrenched in a different culture. And then eventually we moved out to Sheepshead Bay, to Flatbush area in Brooklyn. But yeah, so I spent my formative years in Brownsville, and I would not trade it for the world, Vlad. I wouldn't trade it for the world because it gave me a grit and a character. There's a saying in Brownsville, I'm from the Ville, never ran, never will. And what that means is we don't have a fear gene. You just don't run from things. You don't run from problems. You don't run from people. And that upbringing gave me a lot. It gave me a lot of things that I tap into today in life and in the well of a court specifically. So I think what Brownsville helped me do was remove the fear gene from my body. So it's a life experience, that's for sure.
Well, you and Mike Tyson are the same age.
2 blocks away. He was on Amboy. I was on Mother Gaston. He was 2 blocks away. Did you
ever see him growing up?
I don't know. I saw him when he was 18 up in the Catskills several times. But I don't know if I ran into him or not. I mean, I never got robbed by him, so I don't know. I mean, I know that's what his big move was, but I don't recall seeing Mike. Mike and I have since talked about Brownsville and where he lived and where I lived and all that stuff, but I don't remember seeing him growing up. But, there was a lot of guys who were pretty tough like Tyson there.
Okay, what were you doing in the Catskills at 18?
So I went to Skidmore College, which is right in Saratoga, which is up there. The Catskills is not too far away. My uncle was Al Certo. Al Certo was one of the legendary boxing trainers in the United States history. Graziano, Jake LaMotta, Buddy McGirt, and all the way up. And so Cuss D'Amato was Mike's trainer, and Alan Cuss had a great relationship. Two old Italian guys, bouncing around. So when Mike was really becoming Mike, my uncle took me up there to see him train, and we talked and we met, and he was still a raw young teenager. Clearly was a beast and had some potential that I've never seen before. And we started talking about the good old days, which was not that long ago when we met. So, yep.
I mean, growing up in that high crime environment, did you ever get into any legal trouble, ever get arrested, or were you generally a good kid?
No, I was the victim of many things. Look, I had to fight my way to school every day. Literally had to fight my way to school every day. My parents didn't have a lot. They gave me everything they could. They were two of the greatest human beings ever, and they gave me what they could give me. But, going to school, walking to school there, it was a tough journey every day because if I had a lunchbox, sometimes they would steal my lunchbox. If I had a quasi-new pair of sneakers, I'd go to school in socks, because they'd take my shoes. And, my mother started getting wise to it, so she'd give me a paper bag for lunch instead of a lunchbox. She'd put, orange rinds in there and broken eggshells in there and put my sandwiches in my pocket. So because there was a point in time where I was getting my lunch stolen every day, I'd come home, my mom's like, "You look skinny, you're not eating very well, are you?" I'm like, No, I'm good. She's like, "You're not eating your lunch. What did I make you for lunch yesterday?" And I was like, "A bologna sandwich?" She goes, "No, I didn't. I made you provolone." I was like, she goes, "Where's your lunch?" And then I had to tell her what happened. And she's like, "Oh, we'll get them." So she started putting my sandwich in my pockets and gave me a decoy bag, to bring to school to get stolen. So it was like I went through that stuff, but it was tough. I never got in trouble as a kid, arrested. My parents the law would have been the least of my problems. If I had gotten in trouble, my mother would have taken care of the rest. So I can't, I fortunately did not cross paths with the law in that regard.
Okay, so you go to college and then you go to law school. You go to University of Bridgeport. And did you know you wanted to be a lawyer the whole time?
No. In college, I wanted to be a professional hockey player. As a matter of fact, I got a hockey scholarship. And I set an NCAA record in hockey. And, it was a notorious record, but a record nonetheless. And I had a cup of coffee in the AHL with the Springfield Indians, the Islanders farm system, where I was invited there as a non-drafted signee. I thought, really hockey was my life. I was an athlete. I was a New York State wrestling champion in high school. I was captain of the football team, but also hockey was really my passion. And I really thought I was going to be a professional hockey player. Okay. I'd still be trying to, toiling around in buses in the minors if that ever happened. And I got wise to the fact that I really didn't have that skill set at the end of the day to make it to that level. But in college, something happened to me. I was in the debate club. And in the debate club, and I was a decent student, but I didn't apply myself like I did because I was so focused on athletics, which is as much of the maturation and educational process as academics, by the way, to me anyway. So what happened was the debate professor said to me after a few debates over certain things that he saw me, he said, "You'd be a great trial lawyer. You're really good at debate." I'm like, "Trial lawyer? No one in my family went to college." I said, "I can't be a lawyer." I said, "I guess it shouldn't be on the stars. I can't do that stuff." And he said, "Well, don't sell yourself short. You could do it." And I just thought you had to have contacts to be a lawyer. I thought you had to know someone. So he really gave me inspiration. I thought about it. He said, just take the LSATs, take the law school entry exam. Why not? Then I got serious, and I started working hard, and I did take it. I passed it on the first time and went to law school. And it was at that point that I started thinking, I read a book, Vlad. I've read a book by Joe McGinnis. Joe McGinnis is a true crime author. He's a legendary true crime author. And it's not just crime. He does nonfiction, but folks did a lot of great true crime books. And he recently passed, but he was a legend in the field, Joe McGinnis. And he wrote a book called Fatal Vision. And Fatal Vision is a book that became a movie and other things. It's about a Green Beret sergeant from the 1970s in Fayetteville, North Carolina, an Army Green Beret sergeant who was accused of murdering his wife and 2 children in the house. He claimed hippies broke in. They were looking for drugs because he was a surgeon, a doctor, and they stabbed him. He had some defensive puncture wounds, but they were bludgeoned and murdered. And everyone was behind him at the time. He identified one of the intruders. Someone saw someone matching that description not too far away. And anyway, long story short, he was the victim until he became the suspect. And that happened over the course of years. And the book was fascinating to me. So I was reading the book, and I was like, wow. And one page I'd be like, oh, this guy's innocent. Next page I'd be like, oh, he's guilty. He's innocent. He's guilty. I was like, I've never read a book so intently at that point in my life. And then there was a trial, 2 trials, one with the Army JAGs, which, didn't go off so well. It was, a bit of a mockery, they say. And then the feds took it over when the father of his wife, the deceased wife, really pushed for some intervention, really a full, thorough investigation, because this guy had done his homework, the father. It became his life's mission to get justice for his daughter. The feds took it on. He was eventually convicted. Jeffrey McDonald is, Captain Jeffrey McDonald. It's a famous story, about the Army Green Beret who's in jail. And so he's still in jail. And they made movies out of it. There's been documentaries out of it. And that's inspired me. I said, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. I want to be a trial lawyer. I want to do that. So that's what got me going.
Okay, so you graduate law school and you start out on the prosecution side.
Correct. There were a few reasons. I've always wanted to be a defense lawyer. When I read that book, I was like, that's my calling. I want to cross-examine a witness. And then I started reading transcripts, like cold, just give me trial transcripts. I was devouring them. I'd stopped watching sports for a few years just to really immerse myself in that. There was a lawyer named Edgar Bennett Williams from Washington, D.C., wound up owning part of the Redskins, or principal owner of the Redskins at one point. And there was a book on him called The Man to See. Edgar Bennett Williams, to anyone who's a lawyer knows, he was a legendary, it was a giant of the bar. He was really one of the great trial lawyers of all time. And anyone who had any problem of any importance went to see Edgar Bennett Williams. I read that book and I was like, that's what I have to be. So I figured, let me go into the prosecution first to learn how they operate, how they think. I had an opportunity there. They hired me. I tried every case, Vlad. I tell you, any case I could get my hands on, cases people didn't want. I opened up cold cases that were dead for 20 years. I took them to trial. Anything I could do to get in front of a jury. I didn't care if it was a traffic ticket case. I would do. I wanted trial experience, and I wound up getting a lot of trial experience. I had like 40 trials as a district attorney, as a prosecutor in almost 4 years, and I prevailed at 39. And so I started out 0-1, by the way. So I went on a streak after that. But it was something that it clearly became a calling to me, because something happened in a well of a courtroom, and something does happen in the well of a courtroom to me when those doors close and you're in that well and the bell rings. It's like I become like an idiot savant of trial. Like my intellect goes up significantly. My awareness goes up, like to a degree where I could feel anything happening in court. I understand dynamics. It's something that I can't really explain, but I've developed it over years. Look, you and I sit and talk, and if we were in a bar, Vlad, I mean, okay, I'm not a dumb guy, but my intellect is average. I think it's quasi-pedestrian, smart, but I don't think I'm necessarily the smartest human being around. But that being said, when I'm in a courtroom, something happens to me where I feel like I am a supreme being in there, and my results do speak for themselves. I'm not trying to be cocky; it's just a fact I'm stating. And long story short is that's where I'm comfortable, and that's what definitely my calling was. I love speaking to people. I can speak to jurors, who are presidents of the United States, or I can speak to jurors who are, part of a janitorial staff somewhere. They're all the same thing. I treat everyone the same. I grew up that way, so I'm able to relate. I've tried cases against Harvard lawyers, and the funny part is I teach at Harvard Law School now, but I tried cases against Harvard lawyers in the past. And some of them, I eat their lunch, Vlad, because not that they're not smart, they're brilliant, but they speak above people. They don't speak to the everyday person, and they have trouble connecting. I use that to my advantage. So I like to think I could sort of address people in whatever walks of life they come from, because I could relate to any walk of life, and I've been there. So it's something that I really enjoy doing.
So why did you switch over from the prosecution side to the defense side?
Well,
and go private practice?
2 reasons. One, I wanted to always be a defense lawyer. Like when you're a prosecutor, you rarely get to cross-examine people. I really wanted to do cross-examine. I just read hundreds and maybe thousands of transcripts by this time on cross-examination. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew I was going to be good at that. As a prosecutor, you rarely get to cross-examine people, especially important witnesses. Most defendants do not testify in criminal trials for good reason, even innocent ones. Prosecutors are supposed to win. Their jobs are a lot easier, and most of the time what you're doing is basically saying, and then what happened next, sir? And what happened next? And what happened next? There's not a lot of skill in that. I mean, there was a lot of skill in putting an investigation together, and I used to be part of that, obviously, doing an opening statement, doing a summation, which I thrived in. But I wanted a little bit more. That was one reason. The second reason was I had 2 kids at the time, and we were, struggling to make ends meet. I had student loans and a government salary, a civil servant salary was starting to become, an issue. So I had to start making some real money. I had to start paying back student loans. I had to, make some money at one point. So it was a decision that I was never going to be a career prosecutor. That's not for me. As I often joke, I consider myself a recovering prosecutor right now. And so I did it for 3.5 plus years. And then I made the move.
Well, right around 1995 was the OJ case.
Yeah.
Which was led by Johnny Cochran. When this happened and you saw that OJ was found not guilty, what did you think as a lawyer?
I thought, as a lawyer, and I'm glad you distinguished what I thought as a lawyer. As a lawyer, I thought that was the right verdict. Maybe not factually the right outcome. Maybe not justice for the victims, but it was the right verdict. Because if you understood that case and understood what happened in that case, and I really followed it with a critical eye, not advocating for one side or the other. As a matter of fact, I was still a prosecutor at that time. You had evidence that was tampered with. Clearly, that was proven. I mean, 2 weeks after the crime scene occurred, there was a blood drop on a gate in the back that was allegedly Simpson's that wasn't there in the first day of the crime scene. There's a video of that fence, and there's no blood drop. 2 weeks later, there's a blood drop. Okay, I don't think we have to. It's not a leap of faith to understand what happened there. Then you had the lead detective in this case, the guy who recovered the critical evidence, the gloves at Rockingham, the gloves at the scene, who recovered bloody socks, who found blood in the Bronco, all those things. You had a guy named Mark Furman, who was the key to this case. If Furman planted evidence, the case was infirm and had to be, based on a reasonable doubt, had to be an acquittal. You had a guy who was the lead detective who was clearly a racist, who had used derogatory terms in the past, and actually sued Los Angeles and the PD for a disability before the Simpson trial because he was unable to be rational when it came to black people. He would want to hurt them. He would want to kick them. He didn't want to treat them properly. He literally sued because he said, I'm disabled because I can't coexist with these people. I mean, talk about like OJ Simpson being delivered a gem. And then he's asked on cross-examination by Athlete Bailey, did you ever use the N-word before? This is now a cop. You have 8 black jurors. You're on the heels of Rodney King in Los Angeles, less than 2 years after that. So that city was a powder keg, right? You have a detective being asked those questions because the defense was alleging there's a racial sort of motivation. This guy planted evidence. And he said no. And they said, if anyone came in here and said that, would they be lying? He said yes. Well, not only did someone come in and say it, they wound up getting in possession of these tapes where Furman was being interviewed by someone who was going to produce a film or something, and he could repeatedly use the N-word in a most derogatory, offensive fashion. So he was then recalled by the defense, and what he did was mind-boggling. And this I blame the prosecution for also, because they didn't say, look, he did this, he lied about this, it doesn't affect what happened in the investigation in this case. Instead, the prosecution wouldn't even speak to him, and they basically left him out to dry. And so his lawyer properly advised him, take the fifth on everything. So he took the fifth on whether he ever used the N-word before when he was recalled. I mean, think of this, the lead detective taking the Fifth Amendment in front of a jury. But here's where the case ended. And one of the jurors actually said this. The case ended when they said, Detective Furman, did you plant or fabricate any evidence in the OJ Simpson investigation? And he said, on the advice of counsel, I take the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. Boom, game, set, and match. Over. How can you, beyond a reasonable doubt, make a conviction at that point? when the lead detective is taking the Fifth Amendment, which a normal person means that he's refused to answer because he would incriminate himself, the answer to that means, yes, I did plant evidence in this case. Yes, I did manipulate evidence. How could you convict on that? You can't. And that was the end of that case. And so people are outraged by it, and I understand, but they should be outraged at the fact that, Mark Fuhrman gave the defense a sledgehammer, to sort of pound the grape in. And that's why that was the right verdict. The civil case was also the right verdict, right? The standard is much lower. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard our law permits. It's not clear and convincing evidence, where it's the second highest standard, where you could take away a child from a parent with clear and convincing evidence. Clear and convincing evidence is not enough to get a conviction in a criminal matter. In a civil case, where we're talking about money and property, things of that importance, it's mere preponderance of the evidence, Vlad. It's 51%. So, of course, with that evidence, with Fuhrman and all, you could still clearly come to a conclusion that, yes, he's liable by a mere preponderance of the evidence. It doesn't work in a criminal case where the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a much higher standard. So, that was a captivating case. It was a joke of a case. I think it was not a good case for the criminal justice system or our just system of justice. People saw a judge who had lost control of that courtroom. Just the whole thing was a bad example of how our system's supposed to work. But it was the OJ trial.
Well, the reason why I mention it is because after Johnny Cochran won the OJ trial, he started a firm in New York. And you started working with this firm?
Not so much with his firm, with Johnny. A lot of those lawyers became good friends of mine. Barry Scheck is a close friend of mine, someone I respect immensely. Barry and I have done work together, sometimes on the opposite sides of the fence, but Barry's one of the greatest lawyers, and a terrific human being. Bob Shapiro and I got to know each other in L.A., as a matter of fact. I brought him into the A$AP Rocky case on the civil end. Bob is a spectacular human being also. Johnny, when he came to New York, and I was a young lawyer just out of the prosecutor's office, and I was doing some defense cases, and I had some early successes that were well-publicized successes in the press with trials. Someone alerted Johnny to me and what I was doing. I was representing some rappers like the Onyx guy, Sticky Fingers, Rakim, the great legendary, Rakim and Eric, the great rapper who my last client was named after, literally, Rakim Mayers, right? So it was I was making a little bit of a name for myself, and so one day I got a call, and I picked it up at Johnny Cochran at my office. I'm like, now this was when Johnny Cochran was a demigod, like he was a celebrity to the highest degree, right? It was only 3 years after OJ. I think it was 98 or so, 99. But around there. But anyway, long story short is he calls me and says, look, I heard some great things about you. I'd love to meet with you. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, sure, it's Johnny Cochran. I'm thinking it's my friend or something like that. I said, oh, great. Okay, no problem. He goes, could you come to my office? I'm downtown. I think it was the Woolworth building. And I said, yeah, I will. Again, I'm thinking I'm going to walk in there and they're going to be like, who are you? You don't have an appointment, Mr. Cochran. I did. He met me and we spoke. And he was just the most gracious individual, because he had already established himself at that point. I was up and coming. He took me under his wing for 3 years. He became a friend and a mentor, and he sent me some work. I didn't ever work with the Cochran firm. That was a civil PI firm. I had my own firm, and my autonomy is sort of important to me. I need to march the beat of my own drummer. I'm not a very good employee, but we never even discussed that. That wasn't even really what we wanted to do. He wanted to just do work with me and work on cases together. And he sent me a lot of criminal cases because he stopped doing criminal cases at that point. We then just sort of hit it off. We'd have, dinner and lunches often. And he became like a mentor, like a family member to me. Like I loved him. And we then just one day we'd sit down and we'd go in the conference room, we'd start writing summation points on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What I used in the A$AP Rocky trial, I took out of the closet and dusted off. Johnny and I had written that part of the beyond reasonable doubt thing I did at the end of my summation. I have one that I've been doing for 20 plus years. I have 120 jury trials, Vlad. My normal beyond reasonable doubt standard thing I do in the beginning. This case called for really an emphasis on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I busted out the one that Johnny and I had done together, and I threw it in the end of the summation. So powerful. It was so powerful. Even my partner was like, Chad, who's been with me for 24 years. And Chad said, at first he was like, we don't need it again. We already have our beyond reasonable doubt. I said, Chad, I'm doing the summation. I'm doing this. I feel it. I need to really hit this twice and hit it hard because my summation was over 5 hours. So, what I said in the first 30 minutes, I sort of think needed bad repeating at the end, but it was done differently. It was the Johnny and I thing. And it was beautiful. And I swear I felt him standing next to me at that podium when I was doing that part of the summation. And, it was moving, considering it was the same floor that the OJ trial was in, that trial. It was the court. He was in Department 103. I was Department 102, literally across the hall from each other. And so there was a part of me that I took him up there with me. And he was just, I can't explain how good of a guy he was. I mean, he had the ability to be he was a superstar. And I've seen a lot of people, when they get so big, they sort of forget about where they come from. They forget to be humble. They forget to be nice. They forget to be, I learned a lot from him, including that. And so it was a really great honor to work with him.
I mean, out of all the times you guys hung out, had dinner, lunch, drinks, whatever, did you ever ask him if OJ did it?
With my last lunch or dinner with him, of course I didn't ask him that. I didn't ask him that. Of course, we would have gotten into a debate, but we did on occasion talk about the trial. We talked about his summation there. I do some things that he did. I borrowed from him from that summation on many things. I sort of put it into my own words. We talked about the brilliance of it. We talked about Chris Darden's in-court demonstration about the bloody glove and how insane that was, and how that really was the watershed moment in the case for at least Johnny thought. We talked about how he prepares. We talked about his family, everything, my family, but it was never really like, so come on, Johnny, come on. He did it, right? Because I don't know if he knew that. I don't know if he believed it or thought it. I mean, even Bob Shapiro, who was a great guy and, maybe didn't see eye to eye with Cochran, he said to me, I don't think he did it. I'm like, Bob, I thought you didn't drink. You said you didn't drink. And he's like, no, I don't drink. I'm like, what did you say? But Barry Scheck, the same thing. Once you start representing someone in something like this, if you don't believe, it's going to be obvious. It's going to be obvious to the people you're trying to convince. And so you have to believe, and I believe they believed.
Okay, so let's get to the ASAP Rocky trial. So you took this on 3 years ago?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, yeah.
Okay, so it finally gets to the point where there's a court date and there's a negotiation with the prosecution leading up to the court date. And the prosecution offers a 6-month plea deal, which in Los Angeles would really be 3 months?
You got it.
Okay. I'll be honest, and I've said this during multiple interviews.
You and 100 other people, go ahead.
From my point of view, at that point, considering the risks involved, because he was facing, in the worst case, 24 years, right? When you weigh the odds, 3 months in jail, in PC, versus potentially multiple years in prison.
Decades.
I've always said I would have just taken it, even if I didn't do it, just because the risk is too high on the other end.
Cannot blame you. I know many clients who have done that.
Yeah.
A little different here. One, and people say, "Do you guys have a long discussion about it? Was it like, were you?" I said, our discussion lasted literally 60 seconds. It was Rocky, and it wasn't a negotiation. I never asked for a plea. We never went there asking for anything. We never asked for anything. We asked for a dismissal. They didn't want to do that, so we were going. They then said, the eve of trial or, during jury selection, how about this plea? Would you take it? And I said, look, I'm duty bound and obligated to bring it to him. I'd get ready for trial if I were you, though, I said. And, they're like, what? Because, he's facing at least minimum a decade. He's going in for a decade if he loses, up to 24, whatever. And I said, okay, thanks. And we spoke, Rocky and I. He looked at me in the eye. He said, Joe, how do you feel? I go, Rocky, we're going to win. And he said, okay, then I can't take this because, one, I didn't do it. Two, the plea that they were offering wasn't just take a few months in jail and go home and it's all even now. It was more than that. It was a plea to assault with a semi-automatic weapon, a 7-year suspended sentence that turned into 6 months, which would have been 3 months. But that suspended sentence hangs over your head there. He crosses against the red one day and someone has a bad morning. That's that. It also came with multiple years, I think 3 years probation, okay, where he'd be under their thumb. I had this with Meek Mill. Meek was on probation for 10 years. Literally, they kept extending his probation. He took a plea when he was a kid, 18. I wasn't representing him, but he took a plea with probation. And the judge in that case, Judge Brinkley, who was rebuked and really came down hard on by the appellate division in Pennsylvania, they kept extending his probation. He violated. He was late 5 minutes for a court appearance. He was late for a meeting. He wore white socks one day when he was supposed to wear black socks. That's it. 2 more years extension. So it's not quite that clear cut and simple. Then that felony conviction would have required him to basically never travel out of this country. His career would have been finished. There's no more touring in the UK where he's popular, or in Thailand, or anywhere else where he wants to go. France, Canada, all those places gone. His career would be really, all intents and purposes, over. His Puma deal, gone. Gucci, gone. The Ray-Ban thing that happened was solidified or confirmed after the trial. They were waiting for the verdict. Never would have happened. He would have basically lost his career. And so it wasn't just, 3 months, come on, he could do that, standing on his head. It was a little bit more than that, and he maintained his innocence. So he wasn't about to perjure himself and say, I'm guilty, and I shot a gun. So it was that quick. Look, do you not think for a second, Vlad, I hadn't lost sleep over that? I mean, I didn't sleep during that trial. I still have the look. I'm looking at myself, and I feel, I wish you could do can you do a little Photoshop on this video later or something? Because, this trial was supposed to be 2 weeks. It turned out to be 5.5 weeks with jury selection. When you're on trial, any trial lawyer will tell you, at least the ones that count, you don't sleep during trial. I mean, you take maybe a nap for 2 hours, and you do it like this, with one eye open, a notepad next to you, because inevitably, in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh, God. And I think of something, and I write it. You're in court all day, 9 to 5, whatever. You grab something super quick to eat. I try to get a workout in, because then my mind starts deteriorating. And then you get back into it. We're in the office till 3, 4 a.m. every morning preparing for the next day, fine-tuning what we're doing for the next day. And then you go again, and you're fine. In the courtroom, I'm fine. It's all adrenaline. You're going based on adrenaline. But, at the end of the trial, in every trial I've ever had, my partner Chad too, your body gives in and breaks down, and you get sick. So for 3 or 4 days, you're wiped out. So it's an experience that is hard to describe unless you've ever been in it. But it is, it turned out to be a 6-week thing almost. And it was a war. It was a complete war, because I was going against a prosecutor who had, in my opinion, lost his mind, acted in a way that I've never seen a prosecutor act or an adversary act in my 120 trials. I spoke to 6 of the jurors after this case. They were offended by his conduct. The judge had to come down on him hard, which I've never seen a judge yell at a prosecutor in front of a jury. That was a first for me also. Then he has this very extravagant history, let's put it that way. So it was a war. This was not just a case. This turned out to be a war. It became very personal, because when I'm representing someone, be it Rocky or John Smith, right, or Jane Doe, I get into a bunker with them. It's a bunker mentality. I treat them like family. They are family to me, and Rocky and Rihanna have become family to me. But in the moment, in the trial, I take everything personally. I don't let anyone try and put anything over. There's a lot, I think I'm just different that way. And some lawyers do it, but a lot of lawyers just, it's not the case. They go in there, they do their job, and then they leave. I can't. I have to, it's like I'm representing my son or my brother or something when I'm sitting there. And so I can't leave one stone unturned. And this Judge Arnold, said something to me that I'll never forget. He's been a judge for 32 years. And aside from the compliments he gave, and in front of the open court to Rihanna, he said, your husband's lawyer is the best trial lawyer I've ever seen. He then said to me, he goes, Joe, let me ask you a question. Do you do this in every case? I said, what, Your Honor? And he said, you didn't leave one stone unturned. I mean, your cross-examination was brutalizing, but you just went through every fact, but you knew every fact. And then in your summation, 5.5 hours, but the jury was on the edge of their seats. You covered everything. Do you do this in every case? I said, yeah. I don't know how not to do it. He goes, oh, my God. So it's not just because this case was like a high profile. I said, no, oh, my God, of course not. I said, the poor guy who I represented last year, no one ever knew about, was facing similar consequences. How could I sleep and think that it's okay just to mail it in because he's not a high profile guy? And, so it was, it's it was nice that it was acknowledged by this judge, who was a phenomenal jurist, and someone who had been around 32 years and seen that and said it. The other thing was the TV aspect here. I vigorously opposed this, Vlad. I mean, I didn't want a television in this courtroom because I've seen people lose their minds. OJ was a great example of how televisions make people become aliens instead of like judges or lawyers or whatever. I wanted this to be about Rocky and focus on this case. The judge basically said, that's California. Sorry, too bad you have your objection, whatever. Once the bell rang, I forgot there was a camera behind me. As you can see, there were many times where it was obvious I forgot there was a camera behind me based on what I said, or some things I said out of the presence of the jury, or some of my facial expressions. But, it was good in a way, because a lot of people told me after the fact, look, they'd heard about my cross-examination abilities and skills. They heard about how I give these impassioned summations that move jurors. But they'd never seen it, or very few people had actually seen it. In New York, there's no cameras in the courtroom. In federal court, there's no cameras in the courtroom. So, there was a benefit, I guess, to it, that people actually got to see, me and what I do, and see if the reputation was earned or it was just, a figment of people's imagination. So it was a good thing at the end of the day. And then, of course, you had that most incredibly emotional response to the verdict, and that was all surreal to me, that whole 4 minutes over there. But it was a great experience. It was a taxing experience. It was one that I've felt as much stress as I've ever felt in any case, but that's in almost any case. But this one, it became a lot more personal than it needed to be for Rocky, for myself, for my partner, Chad Siegel. And so it was a sweet win.
Well, the trial starts and jury selection is about to begin. And that's when you bring up the whole prop gun defense.
Well, no, not really. The prosecutors try to make that sound like we just invented it then. This is nonsense. This was the first time I ever spoke to Rocky 3 years ago. He told me it was a starter pistol. He told me how. I spoke to other witnesses who confirmed that's what he had and how. The first time I told them about it, because it's a criminal case. The defense doesn't have to give our defense away a year before, is before the trial commenced. We gave them information. They think it wasn't detailed enough. The judge said we should have given them more. We did give them more, but we're talking about a matter of a day or a week before they were technically responsible, entitled to it, is when we gave it to them. And again, the rules in California are way different in New York. In New York, the first time they get to hear it would be in my opening statement. In California, everything's an open book, so they got to hear it beforehand. But so the fact that they don't get to depose the defendant in a criminal case. We don't have to reveal our defenses until we get there. It's not game playing. It's just, it's a strategy. It's a trial strategy. So we had already lined up witnesses from who we'd spoke to years ago. So about this defense. So it's when it came out. But they would, the prosecution were trying to give the impression that we just came up with it during jury selection. And the judge set them straight. The judge made that very clear that that's not what it's about. And I, in my summation, said, that's all about an issue of discovery. And I actually got Detective Flores, that chief detective, to say, when you're saying you just learned about it, you understand you're talking about rules of discovery and procedure in a criminal matter, not when it, in fact, was known to the defense, right? He said, yes, I understand that. So it was much ado about nothing. It was trying to mislead the jury, trying to sort of get them to think that, oh, we just invented that, which would make it look very, very much like BS. And it wasn't BS.
I mean, look, I'll be honest. When I first heard that was the defense, it sounded a little funny to me. Just because as someone who legally owns guns,
right,
I've always felt that it would be crazy for me to carry a prop gun. Because I feel when I carry a gun, at the point that I brandish it, I'm preparing to kill somebody.
Right.
Because my life is in danger. And I feel that having a prop gun would actually put me in more danger, because once I pull out a prop gun, someone else could pull out a real gun, and then that'd be over. So that's the way I looked at it.
But you're a gun owner, and it's a little different. You're not. You are obviously a high-profile individual, and people know you, and you're
right. I'm not like ASAP Rocky.
But you're not like ASAP Rocky, right?
I'm not kidding myself here.
Right,
like,
right. So, and that's the point.
Yeah.
He was not licensed to carry. He was licensed to possess guns, and he did. In his home, he had guns. And he was licensed. They did a search warrant. They found all these guns. They got excited, and then they realized, oh, these are all legal, registered to him. He was not licensed to carry at that time. He was before, but he wasn't at that time. And what had happened was he'd just come off a series of violent instances, a slashing, where he's got this scar on his face now, even today. Home invasions, and he had a stalker who was obsessive, like really scary stalker. And so his head of security, and this Rocky wasn't exactly at the height of his game, he was just really coming up still. He didn't have the financial wherewithal to have 24/7 security, all the time, 7 days a week. He just didn't have it yet. He had security when he went to certain venues and places. So when he was with his boys, some of the ASAP guys like 12E or Lou or Ills or whatever, he would go out, and that's when he had problems. He got slashed, all these things. And he didn't have security with them full time. When he didn't have security with them full time, Lou, his manager, ASAP Lou, or Lou Evans, who's a phenomenal human being, was a phenomenal witness, actually said to him, and it wasn't his advice, it was one of his security guys said, look, you have all these videos that you do with those prop guns, those 9mm Glocks and stuff like that. Take one, we'll make it look more intimidating, and you keep it with you because it'll deter someone. If someone thinks they're coming at you, you can pull it out. It could deter them. Not to use it, obviously it's not going to hurt anyone, but he didn't want to be in a position where, one, he was carrying an illegal weapon, two, that he would either hurt someone or himself, because that's a whole nother legal quagmire he'd be in forever. And he's got a beautiful future. Rihanna is his woman. She just was pregnant at that point. They have two beautiful children, Vlad. And so it was what he was told to do. He never had to use it before, but people knew. We had two witnesses come in and said that was known, that Rocky did that. That's what was known during this period. There was a video, DMB video. Yeah, DMB was the name of the video he did with Rihanna a few months before the incident where you could see the gun, the prop gun in there. It was the same type of gun that you see in that video, where he was pulling out from behind his back. And that's what he did. It obviously didn't work on November 6th, 2021, in part because we believe, and the evidence shows, that this Relly guy knew that was a fake gun. That's why after Rocky pulled it on and put it in his face to deter him, he laughed at him. One witness actually said, put that fake-ass gun away. And then after Rocky puts it away and is leaving, this guy who, if that were a real gun and I just threatened your life, and I didn't take it, but I threatened it, and I pulled the gun on you, and I decided I'm going to walk away, and I start walking away, the last thing in the world you would do was follow me and start shouting insults at me and almost egging me on to shoot you. That's what he did. And even the police had a problem with that. So, if you look at the evidence in whole, not to mention, if that were a real gun and he fired it, Vlad, as I told this jury, Rocky would have had to be the luckiest human being to ever walk the face of this earth, ever, because there were no evidence of a discharge. Even the cops who arrived there 10 minutes later on their body cam, you hear them saying, no evidence of a shooting here. Okay, it could have been a fake gun. I swear to God, I was like, oh, thank you. There was a parking lot there full of cars within feet of where the shooting occurred. No damage to any car. They looked for every tire to be popped, a window scratched, any damage, any indication of zero. They searched for shell casings, the cops, as you know. 7 cops, 20 minutes. That's 140 minutes of manpower searching with these searchlights. They were in the exact spot where Relly allegedly recovered the shell casings an hour and a half later. With the flashlight, you see them. It's on body cam. They don't find anything. Nothing. So, I think there was a lot more evidence that it was not a real gun than it was a real gun. And so, yeah, people mocked it. This prosecutor mocked it. He said to me, oh, yeah, that jury's going to believe your prop gun defense. I'm like, we'll see, I guess, right? We'll see. But anyway, the evidence supported it. The evidence certainly, and I said in my summation, they said there's no evidence of a prop gun. There's a hell of a lot less evidence of a real gun than a prop gun. But that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's where that law is that charge from the judge is so important. Because what a reasonable doubt is that it's not he probably committed the crime. It probably was a real gun. It most likely was a real gun. I'm almost certain it was a real gun. I'm almost certain he committed the crime. Vlad, that is not enough. That equals not guilty. I'm almost certain equals not guilty. I have no reason to doubt he committed the crime. I have no reason to doubt that was a real gun. There were plenty of reasons to doubt that was a real gun. Not guilty.
Okay, so let's just take a step back. Let's just say this case went a little differently, right? And it was never accused to be a real gun, but is it a crime to pull out a fake gun and shoot it at someone with the overall intention of making that person think it's a real gun? Is that any crime whatsoever?
No. I mean, no.
Oh,
depending
okay.
on the circumstance, right? If you're doing it in a self-defensive mechanism to get a guy away from you, to scare them, it's definitely not a crime. In a scenario where, if, like, you and I just walking down the street and, you know, we pass each other, and I look at you and I just want to scare the hell out of you, and I pull out my prop gun and go pop, pop, because it sounds like a real gun. You know, a starter pistol sounds like a real gun. If I just do that to you, that could be a harassment crime, a menacing crime. Certainly not this crime. He was not charged with harassment or menacing, and it wouldn't have applied here anyway. So the possession of a prop gun, a starter pistol, is not a crime in and of itself. You can make anything a crime. I mean, if I walk by you with a ballpoint pen, I go, like this, I could be charged with harassment or menacing, right? So it doesn't mean it's the action, not so much the object.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, if you commit a crime, let's just say you rob a store using a prop gun, you will still get charged for the robbery, but you may not be charged for the gun?
No, you will not be charged for the gun because it's not a gun.
Okay.
It has to be operable.
Got it. Okay, got it.
But you still get the robbery charge.
Even if you're pretending for it to be a gun? Because you see a lot of cases where people, for example, I remember there was a famous case in Texas where a guy comes in and starts to rob a restaurant, and this guy, one of the patrons, pulls out a gun, kills him, and when he goes over to the body, he's like, oh, it's a fake gun, and he like throws it down in disgust. But he was never charged with murder because it appeared like it was a real gun and it was an actual robbery that was occurring.
Correct. Too bad, too sad. You bring a fake gun to a gunfight, that's your loss. Like, you know, if you put yourself in a position where someone would reasonably think that you're carrying a gun and they have a right to defend themselves, sayonara. I mean, that's it.
Okay, so the trial starts, but leading up to the trial, and you've touched on this, ASAP Relly claims to be the victim. He claims he got shot in his knuckles, which already sounded like
how he survived that life-threatening injury. It's a miracle. I don't even know how those two knuckle scrapes, how he didn't bleed out right on the scene, but somehow he didn't. He survived it. It was amazing. It's a miracle.
Well, and look, a lot of people have cooperated on people. Like that's not a rarity in this world. But Relly not only cooperated, but he actually went back to the crime scene on his own and found some bullets he claimed were the bullets from the discharge of the gun, which, like you said, 7 cops could not find.
The exact same spot that he found.
Yeah, and that seemed crazy to me as well.
And then when you understand who Relly was, I mean, he was a witness that, as I told this jury in my summation, ladies and gentlemen, you had a front row seat to the worst witness in American jurisprudence history. I mean, I bludgeoned him. And honestly, you know, one of my kids who have no training in the law could have done the same thing. He was an easy witness to tear apart. He perjured himself. He admitted perjuring himself. He got caught in one lie after the next. I mean, to the point where the jury stopped looking at him. At one point, when the jury stops looking at the witness, you know, it's over. But, you know, one thing he lied about was, before November 6, 2021, had you ever shot a gun, sir? No, I didn't have my license. So you never shot a gun. How about, did you ever shoot a 9mm like Glock, semi-automatic? No. Okay. All right, let me just narrow this down to make sure we're on the same page. Before November 6, 2021, have you ever shot a semi-automatic gun at a shooting range? He goes, no. I said, no? And he got all belligerent and arrogant like he did throughout the whole testimony. He goes, you heard me? No. I go, I heard you. No. Okay. How about this? Play a video of him in the shooting range on October 19, 2021. Boom, 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 boom. The prosecutor, now you see in the back of the guy, prosecutor, it was like it was choreographed perfectly. Prosecutor goes, how do we know that's him? In front of the jury, inappropriately. And at that moment, Relly goes, shoom. It was like, thank you, Relly. It was like the jury started actually laughing because he happened to turn around the video at that second. And then you see these shell casings popping back over his shoulder. 9mm shell casings. October 19th before November 6th. 3 weeks before. I said, you just told this jury you never fired a gun before November 6th, let alone a 9mm. Then he goes, a 9mm semi-automatic Glock. Then he goes, I said, except at a shooting range. I go, were you here 43 seconds ago when you just said absolutely not? He's like, I didn't say that. I said at a shooting range. I'm like, you think so, huh? I played, the beauty of this thing being on television is I got to play back his answer. Then I said, well, where was the shooting range? Because, you know, what the prosecution was going to argue was that was in New York or New Jersey. And even if he did do that, so what? Because he had to fly back commercially to Los Angeles and he can't carry shell casings on a plane. So doesn't really amount to a hill of beans. I was like, really, where was that shooting range? And he said, I don't know where. I think New Jersey. And the prosecutor, again, completely inappropriately, stands up in the middle of that, says, can we have a stipulation that shooting range is not in California? And I go to him, how would I know where it is? I'm not stipulating to that. And so the witness, but that was the key to the witness. The witness then jumps in and says, all I know is that was not in Los Angeles or California. I was like, oh, okay. Then now you know that, right? I said, okay. That was it. But it was bad enough evidence that he lied about shooting. That was a Friday. I wasn't done with the cross. My son, Chris, who works for the Florida Panthers as a data analytics manager, has zero legal training. He was obsessed with this case. He went on the internet and looked at every gun range in Los Angeles. And he watched videos of every gun range. He went on the websites. The Los Angeles Downtown Gun Club, which is about a 12-minute walk from the courthouse, has a shooting range, and it's the exact same shooting range that this guy Relly was shooting that gun in. You could see the way the infrastructure is, the way the targets are, the numbering above the targets. He said, Dad, that range was in LA that he was shooting. I'm like, Chris, how do you know that? He goes, look. And he sent me a video. I'm like, okay, be back. I took a car, I drove, every red light I went through. I was going about 95 in LA. I went to that gun range. And I said, see this video? Is this your place? The guy's like, yes. I was like, wow, thank you. Soon enough, when I got back, and I was my trial team, I was like, guys, meeting immediately. This was Saturday. All we did was work. I said, we are going to destroy this guy now. He lied. He purged himself again, but about something really important. That was in LA, that gun range. So he had access to those shell casings, and there was no evidence that he ever left LA. Someone posted on the internet, everyone has the internet access now. I think it was on X or something like that, but some person who I have no idea who it is posted a picture of the LA Gun Club, and it wasn't my son, it was somebody independent because I didn't want to bust it out. I didn't want him to get a heads up. And the picture of the video of Relly. And they said, why would Relly lie about that? It's the same club. And they tagged Relly, tagged Rocky, tagged me. I'm like, oh shit, he knows now. This is at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday. 2:10, Relly calls the district attorney's office because we got this on Discovery. And he said, oh, I was going through my phone because I want to make sure all my testimony was accurate. I was going through my phone and I realized I think that gun club was in Los Angeles. It's literally 10 minutes after he's tagged on the post that came out. He knew what was happening about that. So Monday morning was a fun morning for me, Vlad. It was a really fun morning. I go, hey, let's talk about the gun club. You sat here and told us you knew it wasn't LA, maybe New York, New Jersey. How about now? He's like, well, I went through my phone, and he tells the prosecutor, I went through my phone and I realized, that was in Los Angeles. I go, is that what happened? You just went through your phone because you didn't want to be wrong in your testimony? How about your other testimony? Did you correct any of that? The part where you said you invested money in a big real estate venture in Miami in a building, but you don't remember how much you invested or in what building it was? Did you go figure that one out yet in your phone? No. This one you figured out, right? I go, it had nothing to do with the fact that at 2:00 you were notified via Instagram being tagged that this gun club was the same one in LA that's on the video, right? It had nothing to do with that. He's like, no. I said, and coincidentally, you called the district attorney 10 minutes later, right? Some of the jurors were laughing, literally. That was the end of him.
Well, yeah, you called him an absolute pathological liar.
And I was being kind, Vlad. I was being kind because I didn't want to curse in court or anything, but that was...
I mean, if you look at this case, if let's just say Relly was a model witness, never claimed he got shot, never found any shell casings, got on the stand and said, Your Honor, I was scared. I thought it was a real gun. I don't know about shell casings or prop guns, but at that moment, I really thought it was a real gun because he was making it look like a real gun. Outside of all this other stuff, I have no idea, but I'm just focusing with what I know, and that's it. Do you think that the jury may have potentially not seen reasonable doubt because you actually had a perfect witness?
No, I think I would have been much kinder to him. I would have been like, okay, and that's what you believed, right? You believed it was a real gun. You didn't recover shell casings. You don't know one way or another, but in your mind, at that moment, your life was in danger, right? You were scared. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. We're friends. I didn't have to yell at you. You didn't have to throw a water bottle. You didn't have to curse in court like you did. It was nice. You were nice. I was nice to you because you're a witness that does not advance the prosecution's theory. Because if he said that, that's fine. That's really fine. The fact that he thought it was a real gun is the purpose of a fake gun, a prop gun, right? But he's saying, I didn't recover shell casings. I just thought it was a real gun. But, he wasn't shot. The guy 2 inches away from him, Rocky would have to be the worst shot in the world not to have killed somebody if that were a real gun. Right? He was right in front of these guys, his arms raised, and you hear the pop from the Nest cam, and there's 2 bodies right in front of him. He would have to be, it would be almost impossible for him to miss somebody. So that would have been good testimony, actually, for us. So there was no way around it. But then when he started embellishing, I got shot in the knuckles. I think it was the knuckles. At first it was knuckles, then maybe he said it was the floor. I got him to admit it could have been the floor during a punch. With one knuckle had a scrape here, the second had a little scrape, and then the third one. So this had to be a magic bullet. It had to hit the top knuckle, take a little nosedive to the second knuckle, and then do a real deep dive to the third one, then scoot right along. And it looked like a scrape. When you punch, in the preliminary hearing, Vlad, I'm asked the detective, I go, you're kidding me, right? You don't think that looks like a bullet? He goes, I don't know. I said, it looks like what happens when you punch someone and you hit the floor or you hit something hard, right? That's where your knuckles get red, right there, right? He's like, well, maybe. I said, well, let's not leave it up to chance. I punched the podium, now without the jury there. I took my hand and I punched the wooden podium so hard and it hurt like a mother. It was this, I couldn't even feel my hand for about a week. But I made a point and I had blood and red on my knuckles right there. I go, detective, you saw what I just did? Look at my hand. Where's that? Is that the same place where his injuries are? Yeah. Now, of course, I literally could not open my hand for about a week and a half, but I made my point. And then he adopted that testimony in the trial. So there's not anyone with a brain or a pair of eyes that actually thinks that was a bullet wound. He actually said it was, and he sued for $30 million for that life-threatening injury that left him, quote unquote, permanently disabled. So because he embellished so much, because he lied so much, it made it very easy for the jury to say. Then, of course, we brought in a tape that at first he said, well, oh, no, that's not my voice. That's AI. That's AI generated. That's not me. Get that way. Fake, fake, fake. He was literally I said, well, you just listened to 3 seconds of the tape. How do you know it was fake? Well, I know. It's not mine. Okay. So I had to fly this poor guy in from Paris who actually had the conversation with him. And we introduced the tape. In the tape, he's saying, if Rocky gives me $30 million, I'll disappear to an island. The DA will never find me, and they can't prosecute this case. And he used a great example because this is where his mind goes to. He goes, it's like if you hit your bitch and she prosecutes you, but then she doesn't testify or she disappears. The DA's case is really weak, as opposed to if she does testify against you, it's really strong. I'm like, that's the example he uses when he hit your woman. If she disappears, they don't make a case. That's his mindset. And so the jury heard that, and that's called extortion. Again, it was just another nail in the coffin. But his coffin was already so tightly nailed shut at this point. I don't know where else the other nails were going to go, but they kept going.
Well, I don't know if you know about this or not, but the #1 album of the country by Playboi Carti has a song featuring Kendrick Lamar on a song called "Good Credit," where Kendrick raps, "That bitch on point like ASAP Relly."
Exactly.
So he's referring to Relly pointing in the courtroom.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. I know that Relly's really he's done wonders for himself. I've seen the brutalization of a guy online, and of course it was the fact not that he testified against somebody. I don't think one person called him a rat. He's like, oh, the whole world is calling me a rat. I said, the whole world? He said, yeah, the whole world is threatening me. I'm like, the whole world? The universe, everyone in the world is threatening you. Yeah, everyone. I'm like, okay. The prosecution put forth one sort of post from a friend of his, this ASAP member, ASAP, I forget his name, but they put forth one post of a guy saying he's a snitch, right? One. I go, well, that's it. That's the only post we have. Some guy thinks you're a snitch. Okay, that's his opinion, right? That destroyed you? What? So but it was the lying. 50 Cent was brutal on him. He called him ASAP Telly. He was like ASAP Telly, but he was like, this guy's lying. It's so obvious, because he was critical of his testimony. Look, if he had come in and told the truth, said, look, this happened, I was fighting this guy, and Rocky pulled out a gun, and boom, these are not from a bullet wound, this is me punching the guy, but still, he almost killed me, whatever. And didn't embellish, and didn't try and didn't lie, and didn't say, yeah, that's not my tape. Say, yeah, I did want money from him. I did, and I probably shouldn't have said I would disappear to an island and the DA would never be able to find me, but I did. It would have been much worse for me if he'd said that. It's still a good fact, but it's much worse when I have to get a horrible fact out for the witness, and then I have to pull it out and then hit him over the head with a sledgehammer, it's so much more effective for the defense. It's what I would call a glorious train wreck. And Tyrell Efron, A$AP Rocky, former A$AP Rocky, was a glorious train wreck of a witness.
Well, here's the thing about criminal trials and civil trials, because I've gone through both. When it comes to a civil trial, if you get a conviction on the criminal side, including a plea deal, isn't that an automatic win on the civil side?
You got it.
Because
liability is established.
The level that you have to convict on the criminal side is much higher than civil. Like you said, it's like 97% versus 51%. So was the fear of accepting the plea deal by Rocky that he would suddenly owe Relly like millions of dollars?
Honestly, Vlad, that part of the conversation didn't even enter. It wasn't even a conversation. What would his damages be to a scraped knuckle? That's what he had, a scraped knuckle. I mean, what, $55?
Well, hold on. No, it's not a scraped knuckle. It's someone shooting at me and so forth. Isn't that, worthy of a lawsuit? If he actually pled guilty to that?
If he did plead guilty, or if it actually happens, worthy of a lawsuit, but this amount of damages. Damages still have to be commensurate with what happened. What's the damages? Nothing. He went on with his life. He's on Instagram showing his hand with a Rolex watch. He pretended he was a billionaire. He wasn't. He wasn't a millionaire. At one point, I pulled out that he had $600 in his account as he's telling people he's a millionaire, right? And that goes to not to embarrass him. It goes to credibility. It goes to his financial motivation to get money from Rocky. So look, the bottom line is, yes, but that wasn't part of our consideration. Rocky could afford whatever this ridiculous case would have resolved in a civil case. But yes, and I said this to the jury, I said that, I go, he wants a conviction here because he wants you to do his bidding. He's using you all as his money collectors, okay? And if you want to reward that witness, that perjurer, that liar who you should be offended by because he lied to your face. He took an oath to tell the truth and he looked you in the eyes and lied to you. If you want to reward him, convict Rocky. Convict Rocky. But if you will not stand for that outrageous testimony, that perjurious testimony, and you don't think he should be rewarded $30 million for a scrape on the knuckle that he caused, you have to say not guilty. And it was another argument we made, and I think I made it a lot easier for the jury.
Well, I remember watching an interview with you near the start of the trial, and you said that Rocky doesn't want Rihanna anywhere near this case.
Not anywhere near it.
But then at the very end, Rihanna actually was in the courtroom.
Not even at the very end. Basically, after day 3, she was in the courtroom almost every day.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Vlad, look, Rocky and I had this discussion. I commend him. He's like, look, this is my family. This is not their problem. It's not her problem. I'm going to deal with it. I'm like, I know, Rock, but, families are there for each other. It's cool. He goes, Joe, she's Rihanna. I'm protecting her from this. I'm not letting her be here. Let's not even discuss it anymore. I'm like, dude, you're cool, man. No problem. And I said to the judge, I don't expect her here. And I said to the jury, I said, he doesn't want her near this place. I was being honest. Well, Rihanna decided, I don't really care what you want, Rocky. Joe, I'm coming into that courtroom. So please just let the judge know I'll be there. Because the judge kept asking, is she coming? Is she coming? Is she coming? And I said, she's coming. And we're sitting there one day. I'll never forget this, what happened. I knew Ree was coming. And she's in the front row. She walked in 10 minutes after proceedings started, obviously to try and be discreet and come in. And she sat in the front row. It was a relatively small courtroom, but our side, the defense side, was sort of right behind us, off to the right, the defense spectator side, if you will. And we're at the table. And Rocky doesn't know she's there, doesn't know she's coming. But I did. And I just didn't want to bother him with that. I was focused. He's there. He goes, Joe, I smell my girl. It's weird, man. I'm like, yeah, Rocky, you smell your girl because she's sitting right behind you. His eyes got all big. He goes, what? I go, she's here, bro. He goes, you weren't keeping her away. He goes, oh, damn. He started like smiling and laughing. And it made him feel good, obviously, because, she is one of the greatest and biggest celebrities in the world. Okay, one of the most well-known people. And she acted like a supportive partner, a mother, didn't look for special treatment. And she is such a great woman. I got to know her over these years. I babysat for the baby during her Super Bowl performance by accident. I thought I was going to Super Bowl parties. Instead, I was a domesticated house help. But that's another story. But she was so great. And we talk every day after court. And she was just so gracious and thankful. And just every day said to me, Joe, we okay? Is my family okay? I was like, your family's okay, Ree. It's okay. And I'm like, I can't guarantee what a jury's going to do, but I felt good. I did, Vlad. And so after the verdict, after that insanity of that reaction of that verdict, she came into the courtroom, and she came and was looking at me crying, gave me the biggest hug, put her head on my chest and said, Joe, thank you. Thank you for saving my family. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. She goes, I'm naming my next kid ASAP Joe. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to do that. He goes, no. Our next kid is ASAP Joe. And Rocky's like, ASAP Joe, it's ASAP Joe. That's our next baby. But the real important part of this story is, if you saw any pictures of me that day in court, Vlad, I was wearing the lightest colored suit I could ever own. It was like a beige, light beige. Some people thought it was white. I don't wear white suits, but it was a very light colored beige suit. Rhea's crying. She puts her head here. And now I'm hugging her, and she's being emotional. She's, again, I have a love for her. And she pulls her head away. The entire Fenty palette color scheme was on my lapel with her tears. I looked down. I went from euphoria to absolute devastation within about 30 seconds. I was like, oh, it's a brand new suit. I wore the suit once, Vlad. I was like, oh. I said, Rhea, you owe me a suit. She's like, I'll get you 10. Then I was like, oh my God, I don't know if this is ever going to come out. I don't know if it's going to come out. I'm like, and people, Harvey Levin from TMZ goes, hey, was something wrong with you? He goes, don't take that out. Keep that. That's the greatest momentum you could ever have from that trial. You have Rihanna's tears and mascara all over you, her makeup. That's you can sell a thing for 20 grand right now. I'm like, well, that's not a bad idea. So I had them remake a jacket. I kept that. I'm not selling it. I'm going to keep it because it really was a moment that day. And she did something to me that I don't often do during a trial. She brought tears to my eyes in the middle of my summation. Well, it was not the middle. It was the end. It's 5.5 hours, Vlad. And when I'm giving a summation, I am like having an out-of-body experience. I'm really going at it, and I believe in what I'm saying. And I get to the end of every summation, I do something that teeters on being very emotional because I care. And I looked at my client. I said, it's been my honor and privilege to represent Rakim, ASAP Rocky, in the most important moment, undoubtedly, of his life. I said, I think he's just a terrific human being and blah, blah, blah. So I do my little thing there. And I said, I'd also like to take a moment to thank his family for putting their trust in me. His mother was there every day. She's an amazing woman, Brownsville. She's like she's from Harlem. I mean, she's just a tough woman, a really great woman. Sisters were there, and Rhea was there. And I turned to say, and I thank his family for putting their trust in me in such an important matter. And I look, and Rihanna is bawling. She's crying. I've never seen Rihanna cry before. And I'm not very super close to her, but I've been close enough with her for over the course of 3 years. I've seen her a bunch of times. She's a strong woman in every way. I mean, and when I saw her crying, something just hit me in a weird way where the magnitude of the moment, I understood what was about to happen. She was either going to lose her man and the father of her 2 children for a decade or up, or he was coming home. And I saw it like that, and I turned to the jury to finish my summation, and I realized, oh my God, I can't speak. My eyes started welling up in tears. The bottom of my chin started doing that stupid thing, like quivering a little bit. I was like, okay. It's like, help. It's not like I know what to do. So I'm looking at the jury, I said, and I started trying to say my next word, and I go, and. I said, and now I got the camera here. So that's the first time I realized I had a camera. So I turned my back this way towards the court, like, help. I see 2 of the jurors crying. Vlad, 2 of the jurors are looking at me crying. Now, when I saw that, I was like, okay, that's good. Okay, they're feeling this emotional moment with me. That's not a bad thing. I was able to, recapture my composure after about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and I went on and finished it. But it also, I think, tells the jury, and it's because they're not fake, they're real. That's a real emotion, it's real tears. You can't fake that stuff. You can't. If you fake tears, if you fake crying, it will look fake. It'll be shown as fake, and your credibility as a messenger is gone. 5.5 hours, I might as well stood up there for 3 minutes and sat down. But when you do that, it lets them understand that you believe. You believe in this case, you believe in this family, you believe in what you're saying. And you move to the point of having an emotional sort of moment. And I did. And the judge came to me afterwards, he goes, such a tough guy like you. He goes, did I see you get emotional? Were you tearing up? I was like, Judge, I was. He goes, it's a lot. It's a lot a lot of responsibility on my shoulder. And I did. And I looked around and she was crying. He looks at me, I thought he was going to mock me. He goes, wow, that was powerful. That was powerful. And again, it wasn't meant to be powerful. It was just meant to be. It's how I do it. So it was just a culmination of everything, the emotions after 5.5 weeks of war every day with this prosecutor. And it was a hell of an experience.
Well, the jury deliberated for only 3 hours.
One, Vlad.
1 hour?
So they were out for 3 hours because they had lunch. They had their verdict in 1 hour. As a matter of fact, I spoke to 6 of the jurors. It was walking into the back room, they took an immediate vote, 11-1 not guilty. 11-1 not guilty within 1 minute. There was one that wanted a little more, but they did. They talked for an hour. They asked for one exhibit, in this case, the defense video, our version of the video on the street and what happened, our timing of the sounds of the pops, because it was the accurate one. They only asked for that video. They got that video. 5 minutes later, we have a verdict. Didn't take a rocket science. Now it took 3 hours for them to send a note out because they had their lunch. But it was a 1 hour verdict after 4 weeks of testimony.
Well, right. Don't they say that, juries usually spend a day for every week of trial? Is that the usual? Basically what I'm saying is when a jury comes back that quickly with a verdict, it's usually a not guilty verdict.
Correct.
For it to come back that guilty. Because a guilty verdict, even if everyone thinks it's guilty, you still need to really think about it because there's serious repercussions over this decision. So 1 hour, you're like, okay.
I know.
Did you think at that point, okay, we got this?
Look, I've tried 120 jury trials, in my life. I've seen jurors do crazy things. But conventional wisdom is what you just said. And my experience is consistent with what you just said. When there was an hour verdict after 4 weeks of testimony, I was like, we got it. It's ours. I knew after my summation, Vlad, I spoke 5.5 hours. That was the longest summation I've ever done in my life. 5.5 hours, I'm looking at a jury. And after, sometimes after you speak for 12 minutes, they start heads bobbing and stuff, and they're looking away or they're trying to keep awake. 5.5 hours, I had 12 jurors and 4 alternates, by the way, sitting on the edge of their seats like this. And I make eye contact with every single one of them. I prowl around that courtroom when I'm doing a summation, and I look at all of them to make sure they're getting the message and we're connecting at some point. And I'm not trying to be creepy to them. I just want them to understand I'm looking at them. You make eye contact when you're communicating. That's what you should do. And so they were sitting on the edge of their chairs for 5 hours and a half. So I was like, okay, I think they got this. And the end of my summation was perhaps the most powerful I've ever done. Here where I did that 10-question gig. My partner, Chad Siegel, who's been with me 24 years, said, that was the best summation you've ever done in your life. The judge said the same thing. I've never seen anything like it. But I don't need them to tell me. I knew it. I knew it when I felt it. I thought we were going to win, particularly when the prosecution got up on a rebuttal summation and showed pictures of a dog with a mugshot collar, a lemon taking what it looked like taking a piss. I don't know what that lemon was doing. A donut shop and a forest. That was literally the exhibits he used on his summation. And I was like, that's it? That's their response to me? So I felt pretty good. The 10 questions I put up at the end, or 10 unanswerable questions, I said to the jury, I'm going to put 10 questions right here. If the prosecution has met their burden, proven this case like they say they have done, they will easily be able to answer these 10 questions articulately, simply, clearly. No problem. However, if they haven't met their burden, if their case is transparent, if their case is crumbling, they will not be able to answer any of these 10 questions because they're unanswerable. They're unanswerable. Because there were questions that if they prove their case, how do they meet their burden by this? I had 10 questions. And they were devastating questions. It took me and my partner weeks to come up with them. But I like ending summations with a challenge to the prosecution. And I said, now, here's what I'm going to do. I put them up on the screen. I saw the jurors writing those questions. I was like, all right, this is good. I said, I have 2 pieces of paper. What's on that screen right here, I have 2 pieces of paper right here. Those are the 10 questions. I'm going to leave them right here on this podium for Mr. Lewin. I'm going to sit down a minute. They're right here. Let's see if he answers them. I predict to you, ladies and gentlemen, he's not even going to look at them. He has no answers, so he's going to ignore them. I threw that gauntlet down right from him. He ignored them. I mean, if I were him, I would have come up with some argument like, this Tacopina is, thing. I don't have to, whatever. But he literally just ignored them. And, at the end of his summation, I just remember doing this. Like, I did this, like, almost to the jury, like, 10. I went 10. And some of them was, like, smiling. He just didn't even touch him. And I thought that was it. So when we got a verdict in 1 hour, after 4 weeks of trial, I was like, we got this. until the reading of the verdict, where I almost had, I think I've 2 years of my life on the back end are gone. I almost had a stroke. And you could see it on television, Vlad. Did you know what happened or no?
Well, yeah, because after the first charge was
not
not
even
guilty,
that,
there was still a second charge.
No, brother,
right?
not even that. I'm talking about before. And it was the judge having a little fun with me. Greatest judge ever. I'm a really great guy. And I think he appreciated the deficiencies in the prosecution's case. I think he liked Rocky. He loved Rihanna. He wasn't rooting for anyone. He certainly didn't give us the rulings. I think they got most of the rulings, but he was a very fair judge and a good person. And I think justice was served with this verdict. I think he probably, in his own mind, may have thought that. Of course, he never said that to us. But I knew it would have hurt him to have to put Rocky in. I think, because they connected on a personal level. I think Rocky's just a gentleman and was very diplomatic in the court. And the judge is just a nice human being. So verdict form comes out. The jury piles in the room. And this is a moment where I don't care how many cases you tried, Vlad, your heart is pounding, like you feel numb. I was confident, though. I see the verdict form. The judge asked for it. He looks at both verdicts in the folder, Vlad, and he makes this horrific face, like a scowl, almost a frown as you read. I'm like, I didn't think he'd be mad if it was not guilty, but I guess he's mad. I don't know. But then he was making this really horrible look, and they said, I want the jury to confirm this verdict. I want each juror to confirm that this is their verdict. I'm like, what? What? First of all, normally that happens after you read the verdict, okay? First you say the verdict, not guilty or guilty, and only upon a guilty verdict do you then ask the jury to confirm. That's the only time there's no requirement, and no judge has ever, in my 120 trials, has ever confirmed a not guilty verdict. There's no reason to confirm a not guilty verdict. It's not guilty. On a guilty verdict, the jurors have to confirm it to make sure the defense has a right to ask for the jury to confirm the verdict, because they want to make sure every juror has agreed that's conviction. No one's like, that's not really what I wanted my verdict to be, but everyone else said, there was no coercion, right? He then, aside from not reading, he then asked the jury to confirm it. And I was like, what? I said, what? What's going on? I look at my partner, Chad. I go, Chad, speak to Sarah. Sarah Kaplan was our local attorney, the California attorney, who was at the end of the table. I go, quick, ask Sarah if in L.A., in California, that's what they do. They confirm both verdicts, both guilty and not guilty. Go ask Sarah. And I see Chad, who's frowning, goes to Sarah. I'm like looking at this, and I just see Sarah vigorously go like this. I'm like, Chad looks at me, and Chad has this, one of the worriedest faces I've ever seen on my partner. He's like, no. I'm like, no. I'm like, wait a minute. My wires started crossing my head. I'm like, this can't be. It cannot be that 12 people convicted him in 1 hour after 4 weeks of testimony with that witness, with all these doubts. At least it's a discussion, right? We had a rocket scientist on the jury, Vlad. I picked a smart jury on purpose because I want them to appreciate reasonable doubt. I had a rocket scientist, not the proverbial rocket scientist, a real rocket scientist. I didn't even know that existed. It was a scientist who built rockets. So I'm like, I have a rocket scientist on the jury. There's no way in 1 hour they said guilty. It's like, it can't be. It just can't be. But yet, everything was pointing to that. The way the judge looked, the way he had him confirm a verdict, and my wires in my brain was starting to cross. I was getting like lightheaded. Rocky then is picking up this vibe. He goes, he listens in my ear, he goes, oh shit. I go, no. I grab him. You can see it's all on video. I grab him. I go, no. Yeah, you don't know. And you see me. I'm like starting to rock like the Rain Man. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm holding him. Who the hell's going to hold me? Like, right? Because I really thought I was going down. Like, I felt lightheaded, Vlad. He then gives, this is 3 minutes. It's all on television. The longest 3 minutes of my life. He then gives the verdict forms to the clerk to read. Alex then reads the form. Now, people say California versus Raheem Mayer, then he reads the indictment number, which is like 20 numbers. Indictment number, bang, 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 boom, bang, boom. I'm like, oh my God, just get to the verdict, right? And then he goes, we, the jury, find the defendant, Raheem Mayers. And there's just silence. I'm looking at him, I'm like, did he have a stroke? What is he doing? Why is he not speaking anymore? He paused for effect. Literally, is what I found out later. Not guilty. That's for, boom, everyone's screaming. Now, I'm just laser focused on count 2 now, because all I care about is that. I've seen a jury split counts. I've seen crazy things happen. I go to Rocky, I go to grab Rocky, I say, listen, we have one more. And he's gone. I look at Chad, where is he? Where'd he go? I'm so focused on that clerk. I look back, I see him body surfing, like in the audience. I'm like, what is going on here? What was it? Hello? I go, Chad, go. I grab Chad, I go get him. We have another count. And everyone's whooping in the audience. They're all happy. Oh my God. Rihanna's crying. He's hugging Rihanna. I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing will this be if they convict on count 2? Right? But more importantly, I had to get him back. So I got him back. I go, and you see me put my arm around him. I go, bro, we have one more count. Let's keep cool. We have one more count. Okay? Then Alex does his thing again. And second count, not guilty. Okay. I go, now we could hug. And then he gave me a hug that, quite frankly, almost squeezed the life out of me. I mean, at one point I was like, I can't breathe, Rocky. I can't breathe anymore because he had you can see the picture of it. It's a great hug, but I really was starting to get like, I can't breathe, But it was an unbelievable. That 5 minutes was crazy. I asked the judge the next day. I said, "Why did you do that thing that you did? With the having the jury confirm a verdict before the verdict's read, and why did you have them confirm not guilty?" It was, "No, I always have the jury confirm the verdict before it's read in open court because once I had a gang case, and the gang members were convicted." And one of them got so mad he threw the defense table up in the air. He's a violent gang member. Scared the hell out of the jury. When I asked the jury to confirm the verdict, juror number 3 was like, "That's not my verdict." She was scared that there was going to be retribution. So he said, "Now I have them all confirm the verdict first before anyone knows the verdict is. So this way no one later could say, 'Oh, I didn't mean that. That was my verdict.'" I said, "Oh, that's never seen that before, but I get that. I do get that." I go, but what is the other part about confirming a not guilty verdict? You don't have to do that by law. No other judge has ever done that in my career. Why do you do that? He goes, "Oh, I don't." I said, "You don't have them confirm a not guilty verdict?" He goes, "No." I go, "Were you in the courtroom yesterday when you had them confirm a not guilty verdict?" He's like, "Oh, yeah." I go, "Well," he goes, "I was just messing with you." I'm like, "What, Judge?" He goes, "I was messing with you." I was like, "You're kidding me, right?" I said, "I'm going to kill you." I said, "How can you do that to me? You owe me 2 years of my life." I go, "By the way, was that what that face was all about too?" He goes, "Yeah, I knew you were looking at me." I'm like, "You are cruel, man." I go, "That was horrible." Because that was horrible. If you see me, I have a fairly bronze complexion. I turned white, ashen, and I was shaking. Like it was like, I was Dustin Hoffman in The Rain Man. I was just like, So, but anyway, that's the life of a trial lawyer.
Well, some people have actually compared this case to the Tory Lanez, Megan Thee Stallion case, which ultimately ended with Tory Lanez being convicted and given like 10 years. When you look at that case, when somebody actually got shot, but even then people are saying, "Oh, she didn't really get shot," and so forth. The internet, was free Tory and, basically felt that the verdict was wrong. Do you feel that was the right verdict in that case?
I don't know enough about that case, Vlad. I mean, I find it, I laugh sometimes when I see lawyers on TV opining that this is the right thing to do, that's the right verdict. How could he not take the plea? I have so many lawyers, seasoned lawyers, say it was malpractice for me not to let him take that plea. He should have taken the plea. I could be in jail right now with his career in shatters. So I don't want to opine. I do believe the testimony of Megan. I do. So, what the right verdict is, I wasn't there for any 1 minute of testimony. So I don't want to be one of those people to say that, but I do believe Megan's testimony, and I believe she was a credible witness.
Well, aren't you representing Jose Baez in the Harvey Weinstein case? And Jose Baez is actually representing Tory Lanez in the appeal for that case. So you're kind of indirectly connected to it.
Small world, Vlad. And you've done some good work in your investigative reporting, see. Jose is a good friend of mine. Jose Baez is a dear friend of mine and a close friend of mine. And if he ever needed anything, if I ever needed anything, I'd be there for him. He's there for me. So I'm representing him. We've not discussed the other case. It's his thing. I don't know what he's doing with that. But we haven't discussed that because it's just not anything that I'm involved in. So, that's, you have to really, when you're doing this kind of work, you have to just be able to sort of bifurcate things. Like, Jose is my friend. I represent him. Doesn't mean I think his client's innocent or guilty or whatever. We just don't discuss that. So it's not a conflict at all. And I don't represent Megan.
Well, yeah, because Baez represented Harvey Weinstein, which was a case that you turned down yourself, right?
Correct.
And after Weinstein lost, he sued Jose Baez for $1 million. And you're representing Jose Baez in the defense of that lawsuit. Is that right?
You got it, yeah. Now, Jose, remember, Jose and Harvey parted ways way before the trial. So he didn't try the case. But yes, Jose had a fee that he believed he earned for work done up to the trial based on the retainer agreement. Harvey saying, no, you didn't earn that. I get my money back, whatever. And that's what we're dealing with right now.
Well, yeah, you called Harvey Weinstein a rapist who made a legal blunder by suing Baez and therefore waiving attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, I call him that because that's what the jury called him. So, I sort of just was pointing out what the jury called him.
Well, you represented Michael Jackson at one point.
I did, yeah. It was part of with Tom Mesereau, and that was Tom's case. But yes, I was involved in that as well.
Well, I actually interviewed Tom Mesereau about this.
Great guy.
Yeah, great guy, legendary lawyer, absolute of a legend. And he even said something similar to what you said, which was one of Michael Jackson's biggest mistakes in his life was settling with the first alleged victim, which opened up a floodgate to everyone else suing him.
Yep, you got it. Look, it's the same thing that happened to P. Diddy in New York, okay? You settle one case and it becomes public. You put up a sign over your head saying ATM machine open for business. You cannot, if an allegation is made, Michael was innocent in that case where he was found not guilty. Believe me, that was a case that should never have been brought. You had people there who clearly were out for money. Putting that aside, you had a case where you had a civil settlement that was made. The only reason you settle a case like that is to keep it quiet, to keep it under wraps, to keep it from becoming public. That's the leverage. Look, I've represented people on both sides of those fences. I've represented plaintiffs in those cases. I've represented defendants in those cases, potential defendants. Well, when I'm representing a plaintiff in those cases, I don't threaten it because it's extortion, it's illegal. But I do point out that if we have to file this, you understand the ramifications are going to be red ink end of the world headlines. Not because I'm going to generate them, because they're going to read the file. And your client is a very well-known individual. So let's not kid ourselves. You understand what the ramification of filing this will be. Not just our lawsuit, all the collateral damage that will be done, right? And so if you're going to have a case like that, you settle it, but it has to be done with confidentiality agreements that have clause on it that could pierce a piece of steel. If you don't have a confidentiality agreement before you settle it, or you settle it with a loose confidentiality agreement, I wouldn't settle it. You have to fight. What happened with Diddy was, and I don't blame Diddy, I blame the lawyers, because what happened there was insane. It was the worst of both worlds. Everyone loved Diddy. I mean, not everyone, but people want to be at Diddy parties, all this stuff. His ex-girlfriend, Cassie, had a lawyer, and she decided, 15, 20 years ago, I really didn't like what I was doing. I didn't really want to do it. You made me do it all, okay? And threatened to sue. There was a negotiation. Apparently the negotiation did not, ever amount to a resolution, a settlement. Cassie sued. When she filed the lawsuit, red ink, end of the world headlines the next day, right? Of course. What happened after that is perplexing. The case was settled within 1 day. 1 day. That was maybe the worst scenario you could ever have in anywhere in the world. So you force a lawsuit to be filed where you're going to be named basically a sexual predator, and it's all in all the press. Now you have to defend that. And then a day later, not 2 years later on the eve of trial, a day later you settle, you give her money, which, people understand that, we understand that when you settle a case doesn't mean you're admitting guilt. But to the average person, when someone makes a claim against you for sexual assault, whatever, and you say, okay, here, I'll settle with you, I'll give you money, it's because you did it. So that was, in 48 hours, he went from Diddy, one of the most successful, people in that industry, to Diddy, a sexual assaulter, a brutalizer, and he's willing to pay money if you make a claim. Boom! There you go, the doors of the barn open wide. All of a sudden, people who had never had an issue with P. Diddy before, loved being at P. Diddy's parties, begged to be at P. Diddy's parties, all of a sudden, they got lawyers and they said, me too. Me too. I didn't really want to do that either. Me too, me too, me too, me too, me too. But how come none of them ever came forward before that? How come none of them went to the police? None. They saw Cassie do it. She sued. She got money. Wow. Boom. I mean, that's why I was baffled by that tactic, that strategy. If you're gonna settle before it becomes public. And Michael's too. Johnny said that to me. Johnny said he told Michael Jackson, you become an ATM machine if you settle. That was his words. You become an ATM machine if you settle one of these claims, because they'll all be coming at you. And don't ever settle. He settled one, and it sort of led to all these other problems.
Well, you were offered to take on Diddy as a client, but you turned him down.
Look, I didn't turn him down because I don't like him or I don't believe in his case. I think he's got a very defensible case. I talked to Harvey on TMZ. To me, this whole case boils down to an issue of consent, right? And as far as I know, I don't know all the evidence, but it's an issue of consent, right? Did they consent or did they not? I mean, was a gun put to someone's head? Or did they want to do it because they were getting all the perks associated with being part of a Diddy party and being one of Diddy's entourage, right? Did he buy him a house or cars and stuff? He didn't have to buy anyone a car or a house. If he did it, and part of that was they came to these parties, that was consensual, right? They could have said, no, I'm not coming to those parties, and if it means you're not going to pay for my car, screw you, don't pay for my car. And I haven't heard anything, because I read the bail hearing minutes from the prosecution where they argued. I'm like, that's it? That's their case? I mean, I just, I think people are quick to jump to conclusions. Obviously, there's a lot of people, a lot of witnesses, but and I've said this on Harvey's documentary on TMZ, I said, I don't think we should be counting him out just about yet. So my turning it down was because I had Rocky's trial coming up. And a host of other things. So it's not about, I don't think he's innocent or I don't like him or anything like that. It's not that at all. It was just timing for me. It really was more about timing than anything.
Well, wasn't it also your relationship with Jay-Z and Roc Nation?
Yeah, but that got taken way out of, I do have a great relationship with Jay and Roc Nation. I represent a lot of them. I think that was, first of all, I know of no personal issue between Jay and Diddy. I have no personal knowledge of that. So someone, I think it was on the Breakfast Club, sort of extrapolated that, but that would have nothing to do with it. No one at Roc Nation ever told me not to represent him. So that, I think, was misconstrued and probably taken out of context.
Well, there's actually new superseding indictments now where Diddy's now being charged with forced labor, and which, of course, he denies. But, I've said this publicly, similar to you. Like, I've done Pierce Morgan multiple times and so forth. Where it's like, I'm not exactly sure what Diddy's being charged with.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure. Like, okay, was there sex parties? I'm sure there was.
He is guilty of freak-offs.
Were people forced to be there? I don't think so. Was there drugs there that people could take if they wanted to? Okay, possibly. Was there prostitutes that were being paid and wanted to be there for the money? Sure. But forced labor, sex trafficking, doing things against people's will.
You know who the sex trafficking account is? Bud, it's Cassie. That's the only person in the sex trafficking. How do you sex traffic his girlfriend? What are we talking about? I don't understand this case. Look, they've stretched the creative bounds to put this into a racketeering indictment. They really have, I think.
Right, he's a one-man RICO.
One-man RICO. That used to be reserved for organized crime and drug cartels. Okay, then it became organized crime, drug cartels, maybe some bad guys on Wall Street. Now it's just like, I think it's a RICO. Just two people getting together. So it's just I'm not willing to say that's a fait accompli, that case. I don't think it is at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one case that's happening right now that I wouldn't be surprised if Diddy either just, they drop the case, he beats it at trial, or they give him a plea deal that's so light, like a time served, that he just walks away.
They could never drop that case. So just make sure you take that off your radar, because that will never happen. I know how those work.
So the feds will not drop the case even if there's evidence.
Bad they will look
the
around. They just superseded. Then they're going to eventually go, you know what? Or bad. Didn't mean to keep you in jail for a year. Sorry. Never mind. Take care. No, that is never happening. A plea deal, that could be interesting. I mean, that could be something. But, it's like there's not going to be one witness that gets up on that witness stand and is going to say, yeah, I don't have a financial motive here. I'm not suing him. I don't want money. I just want justice. There's not one. And, as a defense lawyer, one of the crucibles of cross-examination is when you're looking at someone's credibility is, do they have a bias? Do they have a motive? Do they have an incentive to testify in a certain way? Check, check, check. So We'll see.
Well, Diddy and Jay-Z got sued by Tony Busby by a woman who claimed that she was raped by both of them when she was 13. Ultimately, Jay-Z fought back, and the whole case was dropped. And now Jay-Z is suing Tony Busby and the woman. And from what I understand, Busby is no longer allowed to actually practice in New York because there's a ruling that came from the Committee of Grievances for the Southern District of New York, which basically investigates complaints of attorney misconduct, and they found that to be true. So now he had to drop like 7 other lawsuits in New York because he's not legally allowed to practice anymore. Were you surprised that actually happened?
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. Knowing what I know and knowing how he's conducted himself, knowing what he did to Jay. Look, even what he Diddy. I mean, Diddy's got so many things going on right now, so the ramifications are different. Jay-Z is just a terrific person. He's not well known by many. He's a terrific person. He's got a wife who's an amazing woman, and he's got children. And imagine you wait, and his children aren't babies where they can't read. They're children that understand what's out there. And imagine waking up one day and your dad's being called the rapist of a child. It's a disgusting allegation. It's a horrific allegation. And you do not make that allegation as a lawyer unless you are 100% sure that happened, because you're hurting someone's life, you're hurting someone's children, and it's despicable to me that any lawyer could actually do that without having a certainty, okay? Clearly this lawyer didn't care. I'm glad to see Jay fighting back, but that's Jay. That's Jay, that's Rock Nation. They're cut from a different breed, and they're cut from a different cloth, and they're from Brooklyn. Like Jay's from Bed-Stuy. So that team there is powerful. That team is strong, and they're more than powerful and strong. I've been working with them for years. Desiree Perez is like the CEO there. They don't suffer fools. They don't take nonsense from anyone. And this was something that some people would have kowtowed to and been like, "Oh my God, how horrible!" They fought back, and look. I told anyone who would listen when I was interviewed about that it's not true, it's nonsense. And if you know anything about Jay-Z, that's the last thing that would have ever happened. Putting that aside, they pushed back hard, and look at what happened. The woman recanted. She at one point, there's a tape recording, by the way, where she blamed Busby for saying include Jay, but she recanted. I mean, more importantly, she recanted. How do you bring a lawsuit with a woman with that type of credibility? She had some issues to begin with, number one. I think they took advantage of those issues, the lawyers, to try and get her, thinking that Jay would say, "Oh, okay, I don't want to be Diddy again. I don't want to have this happen. What do you need, $20 million? Okay, boom, yeah, no problem." No, doesn't happen that way. He stood on principle, and he won on principle. And bravo for him, because it takes a set of onions to be able to do that, and he did it. And it's outrageous. I get angry and also sad when I think about that case, because there's a beautiful family that was also involved in that did nothing to deserve that. But all's well that ends well, and that's important.
Well, but look, I've dealt with a lot of lawsuits, and I've had the people that sued me just lie flat out, and the lawyers just repeat the lies in filings to the judge, and they said, "Well, my client said this and this," and from my understanding, I think they're credible, and it goes forward. And ultimately, I feel like the way the legal system is set up, do lawyers really lose their licenses for, filing lawsuits where their client is lying to them?
No. If they have, look, as long as they're acting in good faith, right? If you know someone's lying and you go forward with it, you can lose your license. You could be suspended. I think the claim here is this guy didn't even meet her. This lawyer, Busby, didn't meet her before he filed this complaint. This guy didn't do any investigation. I mean, you're claiming someone's a child rapist. Dan, before you go make that public file, you make sure you get some facts to stand on. So I think that's what this is more about. Not about, the lawyer was deceived by the client. The client's lying, and therefore the lawyer's in trouble. Of course not. If that were the case, no one would ever be a lawyer, because we'd be all, our livelihood would be subject to the veracity of clients, of every client. If the client's lying and the lawyer presents that lie, even though they thought they were acting in good faith, they get kneecapped. There'd be no lawyers left. So there has to be a knowledge from the lawyer. They have to be not acting in good faith.
Yeah, I just think that the system is set up where it's basically set up against people who do have money, because
Oh,
ultimately
yeah, bro.
you could file a lawsuit, and if you find a lawyer that'll take it on a contingency, you don't have to pay a penny.
Glad you got
and you
it.
go through the process, and the person who's being sued has to pay a lot of money.
Right.
And then when that person wins or the lawsuit gets thrown out, you can't really recover your money from the person suing you, because a lot of times they don't have any money. That person is not out anything because the lawyer took it on for free. You can't really countersue, and ultimately, there's really no repercussions for the person suing who does it. So I'll be honest, man, I'm just not
Sound
a
like
big
you've
fan
been
of
there.
it. And then,
Sound like you've been
hold
there,
on,
Vlad.
let me just finish, because I've gone through this.
I was going to say.
And then you say, okay, well, it's going to cost me $500,000 to go to trial, so I'll just settle for $50,000 because it makes a lot of sense. And then the public thinks, well, you must be guilty because you settled. You see, so it's just, no matter what you do, you kind of take the L based on the way the system is set up.
I swear, you articulate that in about as good of a way I've heard a lawyer or non-lawyer articulate it. That's exactly right. So people say, the people with money get away with things in the system. Sometimes quite the opposite. And you just gave a great example, and that happens all the time. I've represented people, wealthy people, famous people, who have someone saying, I did this. They swear to me they never even met the person. Okay? But they also say, but I don't want this lawsuit filed. I have a sponsorship deal with Coca-Cola. I'm getting married next week. I can't have this now. Well, 100,000, 200. Okay, fine. I'd rather do that, Joe. I'm going to have to pay you 5 times that much anyway. Let me just do this, and that's it. And it's infuriating to me. It really is infuriating. You want to, but, hey, listen, that's why when someone like Jay-Z stands up to that kind of stuff, it hopefully lets people think twice about just making frivolous allegations. But you're right, that there's a lot of that. And especially in this day and age where an accusation is enough to end people. I mean, Kevin Spacey, for example, right? That guy, he was canceled within a minute. An allegation was made against him. Boom, canceled, gone. TV show gone, career gone. He was acquitted twice in 2 different countries. He was vindicated of those charges. How do you get his life back? How do you get his career back? So because someone made allegations that were false but wanted to get money, and people don't give the benefit of the doubt. People don't presume innocence anymore. When you make an allegation now, especially if you're a woman and you make an allegation against a guy, and then if God forbid you're the guy and you say she's lying, or you challenge that, oh my God, you're victimizing the victim. What are you talking about? No one's been adjudicated a victim yet. So if someone accuses me of something wrong, if I defend myself and I say I'm challenging the credibility of that story, you're victimizing the victim. It makes our system look ridiculous, and it's unfortunate in part where we are now.
Well, you represented Trump in the Stormy Daniels case, and I've actually interviewed Stormy Daniels about this whole situation. From what I see, the two of them had consensual sex. He paid her for sex, and
he didn't pay her for sex. He paid her allegedly. Now he denies that, understand, but let's assume that that's what that was. He paid her because after they had consensual sex, according to her, she was going to go public. So he paid a nuisance settlement, which happens all the time, to settle the case, so she didn't, file a lawsuit or go public with it. And it's called the nuisance settlement. It happens all the time, every day of the week. So that's what it really was about. He didn't pay her to have sex, so it wasn't about that.
Okay, because you represented him in the Jean Carroll case as well?
I've represented one of the Jean Carroll cases, the rape, quote-unquote, rape trial, where he was found not liable by a jury for rape. And remember, that's a 51% standard, right? And the New York juries are not friendly to Donald Trump, as we saw in the AG case, as we saw in the Carroll case, especially Carroll 2. I didn't represent him in that. Alina Habba did, where there was an $83 million verdict for defamation when the lawyers asked for $10 million initially. They then went to the jury and said, you should give $24 million for his conduct. And the jury said, yeah, no, we're not going to list you plaintiff's attorney. We're going to give 83 instead of 24. So I wasn't part of that case, though. But the one I was in was the rape case, where they said rape 51 times in that trial. And the jury was found not liable for rape. They clipped him for sexual abuse and defamation, and awarded $5 million to her in that trial. But the rape thing, which was what they were playing for, and which would have been a game changer, because when you're found to be a rapist, It's a little bit different. So we did that trial, and then I was in the Stormy Daniels case, but after about 2 years, I withdrew before the trial.
What is Trump like behind the scenes, working with him on cases like this?
So, listen, here's what I'm going to answer best I can, Vlad, but here's what I'll say. I see a lot of these lawyers who used to represent Trump go on TV and badmouth him now. I don't understand how that happens. There is still a fiduciary obligation to a client, whether it's Donald Trump or Donald Smith. Once you are a lawyer of somebody, you have a fiduciary obligation. Unless the client is suing you where you have to respond, you really shouldn't say anything about the client. Now, that being said, I don't have any issue with President Trump at all. As a matter of fact, I was invited to the inauguration. I was invited to a celebratory party at Mar-a-Lago after the win, and I just couldn't make either. I was in trial in Los Angeles during the inauguration. So I have nothing bad to say about him. He is who he is, though. I mean, he's not the easiest client in the world, without question. I mean, you see how many lawyers he's gone through and cycled through because he's very demanding. He wants what he wants, and obviously it served him well. He's made a political comeback that I don't think anyone saw coming, and he did it, and somehow he, overwhelmingly won that last election. In part, I think it had to do with his opponents. I think the Biden, presidency was quasi-disastrous, and then Kamala Harris was not, I think a suitable candidate. So I don't know but bottom line is he made a political comeback that I don't think we've ever seen the likes of. So, but he was very, very demanding in his requests, and he'd call me at 7 a.m. almost every morning when we talk. And, he's also he wants to do something, he's going to do it, like do some social media posts that we didn't see eye to eye on sometimes during my case where I discussed with him. And, he I guess either appreciated the fact that I would go back and forth with him. And at one point, the nickname for me became the Maniac. He used to call me, the Maniac's calling me now. He's going to yell at me about something. So he said it to me. So I was like, all right, I guess that's fine. But look, it was an experience. If you would have told me when I was growing up in Brownsville, getting my lunch taken from me, getting to, I swear, I think I had 50 fights before I was 12 years old, Vlad. One day I'd be representing the President of the United States of America as a lawyer. I would have said you have a better chance of Godzilla conquering Manhattan than that happening. So, but he was not the easiest client to work for, but I don't think that shocks anyone. I think he'd be the first to tell you that.
I mean, when you look at some of these judgments, like you said, $88 million for the Jean Carroll case, and was there an actual number that Stormy Daniels got out of him or no?
No. That was, I think Stormy Daniels actually owes him money for violating the settlement agreement.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly.
Right? But that was a criminal case. That's where he got convicted of 34 felony counts, which, at that case, look, the one good thing I feel good about myself is this. Everything I said while I was representing him on, when I was doing that circuit, morning shows, afternoon shows, night shows, for what seemed like 22 years, but it was only like a year and a half, 2 years. Everything I said, I still stand by. And I feel good about that because I didn't say anything I didn't believe. And that case should never have been brought. That case was not a real case. They pigeonholed charges into, they made a felony charge out of, at most would have been a misdemeanor, false business records, and they were internal filings. It's not like those were filed anywhere, right? It's not like they were used for tax deductions or campaign finance. And of course, statute of limitation on a misdemeanor had long expired, so they had to make it a felony. So they used to say, he's covering up another crime. Whatever the other crime was, was not clear to me. But again, that was a case that was a criminal case. He was convicted, but ultimately, this guy is a different bird because he somehow survives through there was a point where he was looking at 4 indictments at one time, Vlad. 4 indictments at one moment. John Dillinger, John Gotti, and Al Capone together didn't have 4 indictments, but he had them at one time, and there's not a scratch on him, and it's mind-boggling. But that's he's got some onions, and his knees don't buckle. So, say what you want about him, but he came through it.
Well, these massive multi-million-dollar judgments are all under appeal.
Right.
At the end of the day, do you really expect any of these people to get these millions of dollars from Donald Trump, or do you think it's just going to be wrapped up in the legal system for decades?
I think it'll be wrapped up for quite some time, and I think there'll certainly be reductions. The AG case was ridiculous. That case was, I'm familiar with that case because I was going to be involved in that first. Then my attention got diverted to other cases. That's a case where about overvaluations, bank frauds. Right? The numbers in that case that they were citing for fines were absolutely disgusting, ridiculous, outrageous. But the thing in that case is that they're saying, oh, he overvalued properties to get bank loans. The banks did their own due diligence. He actually submitted every property submitted with a disclaimer on the front page saying, these are our valuations. We're not saying they're the ones that you should rely on. Do your own. And the banks did their own. The banks were falling all over themselves to get Donald Trump's business at the time. I mean, come on. And then there's only one property that transacted because they weren't into selling the properties. Only one. The Doral, the Miami property, transacted, and it sold for about $20 million more than the valuation that they put on it to the bank. That was apparently a fraudulent valuation because it overstated the value of that property, and it sold for $20 million more than the fraudulent valuation said. So, you have something to bring a real case, but don't bring cases because you don't like the person. I mean, that's what they sort of used to do back in the days of Nazi Germany, like find the man, I'll find the crime. That's not really what we're supposed to be doing here.
Well, apart from yourself, there's a lot of high-profile criminal attorneys out there. There's Drew Finley, who I've interviewed before, aka the billion-dollar lawyer. He's representing Little Dirk right now, an NBA YoungBoy, as well as YFN Lucci. There's Brian Steele, who just got Young Thug off. There's Alex Spiro, represents Jay-Z. Steve Sadow, represented Gunna and now Trump. Bradford Cohen, who represents Kodak Black and represented Lil Wayne, who got both of them, the pardons from Donald Trump. You yourself, if you caught a gun charge, who would you have represent you right now, if you could pick from any lawyer out there?
Well, I'll just cite Foxy Brown's song. When Foxy Brown was hit with a gun charge way back about 15 years ago, she put a rap together, and it was one of the best rap songs of all time, perhaps, because she said, then they try to hit me with a Nina, which is a 9mm. I ain't worried because I hired Tacopina. So that happens to be, I think, one of the greatest rap songs of all time. So I don't know. I'm just going to go with Foxy. I'm just going to go wherever Foxy thinks she should go. So, they're all great. I'm kidding. They're all great lawyers. So look, it's about, I would hire somebody who cares about me like I was their family, which I do. Alex Rodriguez said that to the New York Times. I remember recently he said, he treats you like family. He never mails it in, and I don't. I take it very personally. Meek Miller said that, and YG recently got him. The fun of YG's thing was funny. In the middle of this Rocky trial, I got YG's case dismissed down the block. So I had two cases bouncing at once. But look, we're all those names you mentioned are all phenomenal lawyers. You can't go wrong anywhere. It's just a matter of just making sure you have someone who cares, who doesn't mail it in, and is not afraid to fight, because a lot of lawyers don't want to take on the system, so to speak. They don't want to. I have no fear, and I think that comes from the Brownsville thing. But I have no fear, as you saw in this trial here. If I had to go blow to blow with some prosecutor who was a bully and a blowhard, I had no problem doing that, no problem at all. And you have to be able to. You have to be able to stand up. And then, of course, you need talent, you need intelligence, you need experience. And so any of those lawyers you just mentioned would be fine. Anyone, all top-notch people, for sure.
Well, I remember when I interviewed Boosie, who had worked with Drew Finley before, and he said that at the time, Drew charged about $300,000 to take on a major case. And I remember Drew called me afterwards, was like, man, that was my old prices. I don't charge that anymore. Don't put that out there. Everyone was mad in the office. How much does it cost to get you to represent a major case right now?
A lot. And not because of the Rocky, result. It was that way before, because I take only, when I take a case, it's not a case, it's a cause. And when we take it, my partner Chad Siegel and I have been together 24 years, it's full immersion. It's like literally, I was on trial Rocky's case, the whole office relocated to Los Angeles. Not just me. The whole office. We shut down. Everything else is gone. I had new clients coming in during that time. I said, sorry, can't do it. Sent them away. It's full immersion, so we charge accordingly. I'm a boutique firm. I have 5 lawyers, paralegal, executive assistants, and stuff like that, and then we bring in people as we need. But it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a case. I mean, Rocky paid, and Rocky's like, I love Rocky, and it's like family. He paid a lot of money, and that's it. But it's for what they get. It's for what they get, because if I and all those names are great names, so I'm not saying I wouldn't hire them either. But if I could hire me, if I was in a fight for my life, I would want me to represent me, because I know what I'll give. I don't sleep. There will not be a stone unturned. And I have abilities when it comes to communicating to juries, and I have abilities on cross-examination that I don't think there's anyone better. I'm not being cocky. There are other great lawyers out there. You just mentioned a bunch. Cross-examination is where I've sort of taken it to a different level. And my cross-examinations are devastating. And even the judge in this case had made that point when he said, my gosh, there's nothing left for this witness. There's no meat left on the bones. But it comes with the preparation. Look, I do have a sixth sense, and you have to have that thing where you smell blood. But it's also for every hour, Vlad, that I'm in a courtroom doing a cross, we're prepping 25 for 1 hour. 25 for 1 hour. So if I do a 6-hour cross, do the math there. That's a lot of time, and that's why I don't ever wing it. I don't get up there and just start, isn't it true? Liar, liar, pants on fire. I don't do that. When I cross, the cross-examination is the easiest part of the trial for me. And here's what I mean by that. It's the most confrontational part. It's the high-stakes part. But by the time I stand up to do the cross, the work is done. And I know what the answers are going to be. So I can either get the answers the easy way, where I say this, this, and this. Isn't it true you did this on that date? Yes. Okay. Or, isn't it true you did this on that date? No. I don't recall, or no, I didn't. Really? Boom. Then we go into what's called impeachment. Every question I ask, I know the answer to. And if I don't get the answer I want, I have where I'm going to get it from. So there's a source. If I could show you a cross outline of mine, it's a chart. And there's not a question I will ask in cross-examination that I don't have the answer in my hand ready to go. If I don't get the answer I want, I'll get the answer I want. And that's the skill. And Larry Posner is this amazing lawyer who I learned from as a young lawyer, who was really an academic. He was a great trial lawyer. He's sort of semi-retired, living in Hawaii right now. Lucky him. But he wrote this book called Science of Cross-Examination, because it's not an art, it's a science. And he really gave me the methodology to cross-examine it in a foolproof way. So I've never sat down in cross-examination going, damn it, that guy got the best of me. Just has never happened. And I'm not being cocky, I'm just being factual. That comes with insane amount of hard work and preparation.
Well, let me ask the question a different way. One of my lawyers right now, she charges $950 an hour. Mm-hmm. What is your hourly rate as the principal in your law firm?
$2,400 an hour.
How much?
$2,400 an hour.
$2,400 an hour. Hey, congratulations for getting it. Congratulations. Well earned.
I've had people say I can't swing it, and it's fine. I have other lawyers I refer them to, who are really great lawyers. But the level of demand I'm at now, and what I get for that, what I give for that is blood. I give blood for it. It's not this. It really is. And then, but again, and by the way, that's the number. Now, if someone comes in and they, I just happen to love them, and I feel for them, and I feel like they're being victimized, and I feel like the system is running roughshod over them, and they can't afford that, I will always try and work something out. Always. If I'm representing a police sergeant right now in Yonkers, okay? A police sergeant who is a 26-year veteran of the force, who doesn't have a blemish, not a disciplinary complaint against him. You know how hard that is, Vlad, to be a police officer 26 years and not have anything? His son was a cop. His son was victimized by a perp who was carjacking, was high on drugs, and really hurt the cop and did all these horrible things. And he got a call off the radio, thought his son was in critical condition. And he responded as a father and a cop. And he chased the guy. The guy brake checked him. He had a carjacked car. And he stopped, and his head hit the windshield. And finally, when they went to take him down, he used reasonable force. He punched and gave a few kicks. Guy didn't die or anything, but it was reasonable force according to the guidelines. He got indicted. He's never had a problem before. The guy who carjacked the car, robbed people, tried to kill cops, was off start out with a felony indictment, was offered a misdemeanor and no jail time. I mean, we are so out of whack in this system sometimes. So that's a guy that is not paying $2,400 an hour, Vlad. He's just not. He's a police sergeant. And, you know, I appreciate law enforcement. I'm not a defense attorney who thinks law enforcement is the problem or they're the enemy. They're not. I'm a former law enforcement officer myself. I have a lot of relatives who are cops. And when I put it this way, when I represent a cop in front of a jury, I remind the jury of something. I said, you know, you and I go to work every day. Vlad, you go to work, you hope you have good reviews, good ratings, you have a great show. You know, I go to work every day, I hope I have a successful day in court, or I make money or whatever. A guy who owns a restaurant hopes he has a lot of sales that day. A cop goes to work every day and hopes that they come home. Try and let that swivel around your brain for a little bit. You know, walk in those shoes for a minute. And I think that's something that you have to, you know, appreciate. I know cops are being really condemned. And look, the bad cops are the bad cops, and they're bad apples in every walk of life. When you're a cop, it's even worse because you are entrusted with protecting the society and protecting our community, and you have power. So when you abuse that power, it's horrific. But, you know, on the other hand, not everyone does.
Well, that's what it is. Joe Tacopina, appreciate you coming in, and congrats on that ASAP Rocky win. I'll be honest, a lot of people did not think you were going to pull this off. A lot of people thought that
I don't read comments,
this was crazy to even, you know, forego this plea deal. Most of my guests who I had on my show all said Rocky should have taken the plea deal. I would have taken the plea deal. But you actually stood firm, and you got not guilty on 2 counts, you know, on top of all the other work that you did over the years. So congratulations, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Vlad. I appreciate you. Big fan of yours, and I appreciate you having me on here.
That's what it is. Until next time. Peace.